Fur Affinity hasn't been in the best of spots lately, as not only is the site still at odds with a very vocal portion of its community, but now things seem to be getting a bit rocky internally as well. Since late September, Fur Affinity has been getting a large amount of pushback from the babyfur community, resulting in the site's reputation taking a pretty hefty hit. One that has resulted in the resignation of multiple staff members. Hearing all that is probably leaving you wondering how we even got here. Well, let me give you a quick rundown of these last few months so you can better understand why the most widely known furry art site seems to be on a decline as of late. One you could argue was self-inflicted, but for most of this video to make sense, of course I need to explain what baby furs are. Baby furs are essentially the furry fandom's flavor of ABDL, or the adult baby diaper lover community. It consists of adults who engage in role-playing as infants or children, wearing diapers, mimicking infantile behaviors, etc. This is usually presented as either a kink, coping mechanism for past trauma through the act of age regression, or some other third thing depending on who you ask. I personally don't have much of an issue with the group despite my own personal refusal to interact with it directly, but I'll elaborate more on my thoughts near the tail end of the video. Getting back on topic, why are baby furs having issues with the handling of Fur Affinity, you may be wondering. A number of baby fur users would post on their social media about their suspensions from the website, their baby fur artwork being cited as the reason why. At first, one would assume this was due to the nature of the artwork, baby furs in sexual situations and what have you. Well, you'd be somewhat right. Of the examples presented, there were multiple examples cited that one can assume were of a cub character defecating their diaper to an absurdly nauseating degree. However, there were also other baby fur artists getting cited with artwork that, while you could argue whether this appeals to a fetish, there isn't anything overtly sexual about the piece, nor was it the artist's stated intention to be. But despite the differing content of these two drawings, both of these users were given the exact same reason for their suspension, posting an image that depicts one or more characters with childlike appearances involved in sexual fetish activity. Baby fur, ABDL, and diaper art is allowed on Fur Affinity. However, the characters cannot be physically or mentally regressed or otherwise appear to be represented as a child in fetishized artwork. So this here states that Fur Affinity doesn't allow artwork that shows a minor or mentally regressed character in a sexual or fetish situation. This statement makes sense when the context is a cub character unloading inhuman metrics of shit into the world's most durable pull-up. But when the art is of a young character in a diaper doing nothing overtly sexual, some might be a bit confused as to what the issue here is. It comes off as Fur Affinity not being consistent when enacting their policies, and because of that inconsistency, users of the site saw this as the start of the baby fur purge. Fur Affinity had to be on their way to banning any and all age regression art, even though they said it was only sexual and fetishized artwork they were going for. But that didn't matter. Actions speak louder than words. And because the actions of FA staff didn't match their words, neither did the public's perception. Regardless of what the intention was, people saw the result of what happened, put together the worst case scenario, and took it running. You can see the sentiment in the replies of Fur Affinity's posts, as well as one on the fundraiser made for the site owner Dragoneer's passing. Fur Affinity staff had to be cleaning up the site so they could pawn off Dragoneer's legacy. Baby furs were being executed in the streets of Fur Affinity, and Skiggles was to blame for it. For those unaware, Skiggles is the current head administrator of Fur Affinity. Since taking the helm of the website, things were running about the same, outside of the site getting hacked and then this baby fur controversy popping up. Once word started spreading that the staff of Fur Affinity were suspending baby furs, Skiggles would come onto Twitter to quell that concern, stating that FA wasn't for sale and that there were no plans to sell it. However, she also mentions that she'll have to wait to be released from the hospital before she could actually do anything about the current panic, because around the time this began, Skiggles found herself in the hospital due to a blood clot in her brain, leaving her unable to meaningfully engage with the situation. And as expected, that blood clot took priority over tending to the baby fur panic, much to the dismay of some that Skiggles would have back and forths with on Twitter, something that could be seen as unprofessional. But given this is in regards to baby fur art, it does become a little more difficult to treat this with the seriousness that's expected by default. But a few days after Skiggles would get released from the hospital, we began to see tweets from the official for Affinity account addressing the situation. On October 5th, they would post a tweet clearing up the rumors spreading around on account of these baby fur suspensions, stating that no, they weren't cleaning up the site to be sold, there haven't been any rule changes, and that they were in communication with multiple baby furs looking to clarify Upload Policy 2.7, content involving minors. The same policy that caught the ire of a few Pokemon lovers about a year ago. As expected, baby furs in the replies did not have faith in this response, and much like the initial start of this panic, people were operating on the belief that they were targeting all types of age regression arts when the suspension message specified what type it was targeting. But even then, I still have to clarify that this statement wasn't consistently acted on, nor was it actually presented in the upload policy, making the second statement of FA's response a technical lie despite the third statement following it. But regardless, while things weren't looking too great on the FA account, there were at least signs that Skiggles was making an attempt to mend things over with the baby fur community, reaching out to some directly to apologize while unsuspending their accounts. However, things appear to hit a snag on October 22nd, with the revision of Upload Policy 2.7. They start out by explaining that a large number of baby fur accounts and artwork were getting mass reported, and while some submissions were rightfully taken down, others were caught in the crossfire, getting the artist suspended for a week and receiving a final warning, as per the punishment of violating Policy 2.7. They then tell us what type of baby fur content broke their upload policy, stating, "The removed content that caused confusion and sparked debate was content that featured minor appearing characters with messy/dirty diapers, and age regression that was either labeled under kink accounts or showed fetish content." They agreed with feedback saying that this was too harsh a punishment for those who were either in good standing or didn't post fetish material. And although they would keep the punishment for breaking the policy in place, they would do what they could to prevent misfires from occurring again, such as clarifying what violates this policy, which we'll get into in a moment. Continuing on the received feedback, the baby furs they talked to took issue with the FA staff using the textbook definition of kink and fetish in their rulings, as they didn't see being a baby fur as a sexual thing, nor did they like the suspension message accusing them of sexualizing minors. I'm gonna be charitable here and assume this sentiment isn't in reference to the diaper-filling art mentioned prior, nor the multitude of sexual baby fur arts that did get hit by the mentioned spray fire of reports, as surely that doesn't account for the majority of that community. Continuing to read this section, while we were speaking to members of the baby fur community, we found that while some do not find messy diapers sexual, some do, and some only if the messing is to a certain extent. There was not a good consensus on where the line is because the content matter is too subjective and open to interpretation to be able to properly moderate. Okay, so while no rule change had happened to start all of this, we are making one now in hopes of bringing further clarification and fairness to our rules. We want to be clear, we are not pushing out or removing the baby fur or ABDL community. You are welcome to still post your content on For Affinity, so long as it abides by our upload policy. The next section announced one of the more major changes to Policy 2.7, that there would no longer be an allowance of minors in mature or adult rated content, meaning minors could now only appear in general rated content. For the uninitiated, this essentially means that minor characters could only appear in artwork with little profanity, no nudity of any kind, no sexual or fetish theming, and mild violence. Compared to the other ratings, this sounds like a pretty beneficial change, although it does raise the question of loopholes to this policy. We saw a similar discussion when the policy brought Pokemon and Digimon into question, and how those who were against the policy change argued that young-looking Pokemon could actually be above the age of consent. You would see this Trico in specific pop up a lot during this time. In regards to babyfur specifically, this comes off as the definition of kink and fetish not being set in stone in the community, because no one really agrees on a standard baseline. I mean, it's listed here how those who FA staff talked to couldn't even agree to how much crap it took for diaper filling to be considered sexual. So now the lack of concrete definition seems to be leaving Fur Affinity in a catch-22, where even if they try to be consistent with their own policy, they won't be able to, because there's very little consistency to this subject matter in the first place. But despite this, the change they made here is one I can see as a step in the right direction, at least in regards to baby furs in specific. They gave a written definition of each debatable word in the original policy, the most notable being that characters with a childlike body or the consciousness of a child are considered minors. They would also give a list of scenarios where minors could not be drawn in on the site, the ones aimed mostly towards baby furs being messy diapers. Minors may not be shown wearing messy diapers, depicted as brown, yellow, leaky, lumpy with excrement, visible wetness, soiled indicator, etc. This does not apply to big or puffy clean diapers. And regression. Characters that have been regressed to being minors, physically or mentally, may not be depicted breastfeeding, being born unbirthed, or having their diapers changed. So to give a TLDR to the policy, essentially they told baby furs that no, they weren't coming for age regression as a whole, nor listing them all as child predators. But due to a mass reporting spree, they took their initial policy and elaborated on it, so that baby furs knew what kind of artwork would cross their line of moderation, as a number of which that were okay were accidentally caught in the crossfire. This change was received poorly. Personally, I see this change as beneficial as it makes clear what kind of offending content was in this situation. It clarified that baby furs weren't the problem, just those who drew minors or age-regressed characters in kink and fetish content. Obviously, it still has the same oversight of childlike proportions being applicable to kobolds, goblins, or adult characters that are just short. But other than that, this reads like a step in the right direction, but one that was too rough around the edges to be implemented just yet. But looking through the replies on Twitter, a number of baby furs were not too pleased with the decision. There also seemed to be some discussion surrounding eggs being banned because FA staff allegedly saw them as minors. But from what I've seen, this just appears to be another case of FA staff not relaying things properly and it getting spread around in the worst light possible because of it. Apparently, there was a Discord ticket asking if eggs were allowed to be in fetish content. This was responded to by saying that it was fine as long as there's no context of a minor being involved. But then someone asks if it's fine that they have art voring people and popping them out as eggs, basically pulling a Yoshi. And then the same mod responds, saying that it's fine as long as they're not voring a minor. But they end it by saying that a fertilized egg, on the other hand, is contextually a fetus. Which, what? They're just doing Yoshi neutral special. Where's the fertilization here? You could have just said don't vor and put minors in eggs and it wouldn't have been confusing. But instead, the discussion blew up, Skiggles locked it down when the flames started going off, so the napalm just went elsewhere. This led to even more anger from the baby fur community, as vocal members in that Discord discussion were getting banned. For Affinity later tweeting out that people could appeal if they believed their ban was unjust. This also muddied the view people had of the Fur Affinity leadership as a whole, as the display being shown by Skiggles and company came off as anything but professional. These sentiments would continue to accumulate until eventually things would reach a crescendo of sorts. October 23rd, 2024. An artist would post artwork onto Fur Affinity. The artwork in question appeared to be a commentary on the treatment of baby furs on FA. The piece was titled Honoring Dragoneer's Legacy, and it is one of the more unhinged things I've seen this month, this week maybe? It's so unhinged that I think the only way to do it justice is to go through it with you right here. In the first panel, we see the sonas of the deceased Dragoneer, the moderator involved in the egg controversy, Luffy, for Affinity mascot Fender, and Skiggles, all drawn in babyfur styling, with Skiggles saying, "Get me out of this, change us back, we're not one of you babyfur degenerates." You then have the artist Sona responding with, "Sorry, princess, it's out of my paws now. These diapers and pacifiers have some pretty strong draconian magic infused in them. I'd say they'd only come off and revert you if you proved you were big boys and girls who didn't need to potty in their bed all the time. Oh wait, I guess that means for you, it'll be permanent." I don't think there's a better word to describe this other than unhinged. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is because Skiggles herself would catch wind of this, posting a frustrated tweet about it saying, "So, forcing your kink on others, including someone that passed away, is how you want to go about this? I never once called babyfur/ABDL folks degenerates. I have friends in these communities and have been actively trying to help. Doing this is not okay." Now, I would show you the reception to this tweet and even the artwork in question, but both have been deleted. The tweet a few days later because Skiggles saw it as a reactionary response, and the artwork because the artist would be permanently banned for this. I couldn't tell you what the hell this guy is going on about, but the picture speaks for itself. If you look at the reason for the ban, it lists Policy 2.11. Traced, plagiarized, or stolen content. You have done this by using multiple characters in content without their permission in your submissions. Now, there are multiple ways this could be viewed, and personally I have a bit of understanding towards both. This could be viewed as a perfectly justified ban, as, on paper, this artwork is, again, fucking unhinged. Drawing the character of a dead man and staff members you don't like as babies because you don't agree with their policy towards baby furs. It'd be like if someone running a Discord server banned feral porn in the not safe for work section, so a disgruntled member put time and effort into drawing the server owner getting screwed by a dog. In a word, unhinged. But if you pan out on Skiggles' situation, the incident could be argued as another case of unprofessionalism. Like, imagine drawing Elon Musk as a baby. Just imagine you did that. Imagine you did that because of his recent change to the block policy, and Elon himself banned you from Twitter. He'd never live that down. You'd see new drawings of it popping up everywhere, making fun of him for getting so butthurt he banned someone for mocking him. This is all to say that when you're in a position like Skiggles is now, head admin for Affinity, effectively Popufur numero uno in a sense. When you're in any platforming position like that, there will just be people who dislike you, whether they have a justified reason to or not. This doesn't fully justify your haters drawing your Sona in a fucking draconian pamper over sloppy rule adjustments, but it's to say that people acting out like this, as egregious as it might be, shouldn't get under your skin to the point of banning someone for drawing parody or hate art. At least in the case of running a full website as opposed to a Discord server like in my previous example. Unless it's a death threat or calling for real-world violence. Obviously there were a few extreme exceptions to this, but besides those cases, you kinda just have to roll with the punches and aim to focus on ensuring the site is operating properly, tuning out the haters and acting on criticism, so to speak. As far as I see it, there wasn't much issue with the concept of Policy 2.7's update. I mean, there is a lot less teen pregnancy than the last time they changed it after all. All they really had to do was make an effort to ensure that they applied it consistently from that point forward, and things should have been fine from there. That's not what would happen though. On October 28th, the Fur Affinity Discord server would see a multitude of moderators publicly announcing their resignations. You'd have Luffy, the admin mentioned earlier in the egg controversy, but also a number of others who decided to step down from their respective positions. While none of them gave that much of a concrete reason as to why, as they're all still under NDAs, They would state that their departure was on their own terms for personal reasons. A few other server members would make the assumption of it being due to the current Cub debacle, but the resigning mods would state that it wasn't the case. But regardless of their reason for stepping down, it did mean that there were less heads on the staff team. It raised the question of how the state of Affinity was looking, something that the mods were adamant was fine, but a journal that was released 2 days after this would leave it even further up in the air. On October 30th, a new journal would be posted. 2.7 hold, apology, and open letter. The post opens with a quick acknowledgement of the feedback they've gotten up to this point, before extending an apology to the babyfur community, who they list here as targets of a deliberate mass reporting incident not handled with proper care. A bit of a step away from pointing out the number of justified reports among the report brigade, but a report brigade is wrong nonetheless, let alone the inconsistency that accompanied it. As an apology to the babyfur community, the staff at FA decided to pause all moderation actions involving Policy 2.7, with the noted exception of egregious or non-artistic violations. Thank God they included that. They followed this up by reminding everyone that malicious mass reports would not be tolerated, and that going forward, they would make sure that abuse of their ticket system didn't lead to individuals or communities being unfairly targeted. The next paragraph is where things feel a bit odd. It starts out with acknowledgement that the discussion and changes made to Policy 2.7 had shaken and broken the trust users had with Affinity, and that hopefully it could be regained in time. But this is immediately followed by citing a lack of transparency as a large component as to why this is, when one could argue that things haven't been more transparent. Correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I've seen in regards to this community, things have been quite transparent, but issues appear to arise mostly from miscommunications. If things weren't as transparent as they now aim to be, I'd argue there wouldn't be site users throwing eggs left and right, but they do state that they're developing a plan to address their transparency issues as well as many others, but that they would need time to do so, as expected. The other half of this journal would be the open letter portion, written solely by Skiggles. It opens by speaking on how Dragoneer's passing over 2 months ago had shaken up the staff of the site. Between the grieving and the amount of responsibilities he handled that now they'd have to pick up, safe to say the team has been overwhelmed by the stress of it all. Skiggles' letter would be an attempt at humanizing the staff of the site to the community, emphasizing that they aren't perfect, and that following the loss of a handful of staff members, Skiggles and the remaining team would need help, as she announced the opening of their moderation applications, allowing the community of Affinity to help the site go in the right direction, whatever that direction might be. Because despite this journal helping me to understand the struggles currently going on in the staff team, the opening of mod and support team positions only made me that much more skeptical to the direction this site was going, especially when checking the reception to this journal in the Twitter comments. You'd have some holding out a bit of optimism, others scorned to the point of no return, others who I think didn't even read it. And then you have responses like this, where a babyfur lists demands of what they think will earn back the trust of babyfurs, ranging from the singling out and removal of any mod who suspended a babyfur during the report wave, to throwing out the new option to ban minors from your page, and instead just banning minors from Affinity altogether. Because why should minors have access to the safe for work art on Affinity when the diaper-wearing adults are being oppressed? The divide of responses just doesn't really do the best to assure me that people will apply to moderate the site with the best of intentions in mind. They can either be a hardcore babyfur defender who will try their damnedest to get diaper filling general rated, or they could be someone looking to continue this ordeal by carrying out malicious suspensions as soon as they're able, even further sullying community trust. This is all to say that out of these that this ordeal affected, I don't really believe anyone but the overtly optimistic were really going to be quelled by this journal, and that only time can tell us if things will get better through the community-fueled increase of manpower coming soon. Surely there has to be some goodwill inside those over 500 applicants, right? So, I said around the start of the video that I'd save my thoughts on baby furs for the end here. It's probably safe to say my thoughts have slipped out more than enough in this video, but I will elaborate that while I find the concept of ABDL to be more on the repulsive side of things, I don't have complete issue with the community as a whole. My ire more so lies solely towards those within the group who will attempt to sexualize infantile behaviors, usually using the excuse of it being between two consenting adults. So it's fine that an adult is fornicating with someone who's 22 but mentally regressed to 12. And God forbid this is art where the character physically regresses to match their mental age. These are people who will essentially engage in age play, but will use ABDL and babyfur communities as a cudgel to wrongly label it as age regression instead. Something that shouldn't be sexualized in any sense of the term. So, by that logic, I'm sure you can understand why I say that the change Fur Affinity made to its rules in regards to baby furs was a step in the right direction. Clearly it still had that lack of clarity we're all too familiar with, but surely keeping characters who are minors or mentally regressed out of more sexual illustrations was a good first step. A step they immediately fell back on not too soon after, something that made it clear to me what the main issue here was. Much like Dragonair before her, Skiggles appears to be the kind of person who wants everyone they interact with to like them. She comes off as a people pleaser, this mostly being based on the way they heavily leaned in the direction of appeasing the baby fur community, when it was clear a number of them were unhappy with the clarifications of Policy 2.7. And just as they were unhappy with the change, you'll see a number of those who were unhappy with the change being reverted, possibly getting the idea that FA staff aren't able to figure out what actually constitutes something as a minor. This is just what happens when you try to appease everyone. You end up with all sides unhappy, each for differing reasons. And the worst part of it all is, this was kind of inevitable. I compare the furry fandom to a city a lot. So going by that analogy, Fur Affinity is effectively our community rec center. It's where pretty much anyone in this melting pot of a fandom can meet and share their artistic prowess. And since Fur Affinity's whole purpose is to be a welcoming place for all artists within the rules, you'll obviously anger the residents who got kicked out even though they were supposedly fine to be there. In this case, that happens to be the residents drawing cub characters filling their diapers. Do not ask me what the property value is of this analogy. So to cut a long story short, if Fur Affinity continues on this path of trying to appeal to all sides of the fandom, except those that have wronged them in some way, it might not be around for much longer, unless something were to drastically change. And if I were to recommend that change, it would definitely be to implement a blacklist. Something we actually should be getting word on soon. I mean, hey, it's only been 18 years since they promised the blacklist function. Surely it'll be here any day now. Any day now. Stay safe out there.
Funding for this program was made possible by